So we're talking about this first precept. I'm going to read it to you again. The precept says, I undertake the training to not cause harm, not harm or destroy other living beings, and form the intention to bring forth compassion and to learn the ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and the environment we inhabit. Wise words, tall order. But what this precept is doing, it's growing our hearts to be more sensitive to the ways in which we cause harm to ourselves, to others, to animals, to plants, and the environment. And it is feeling this pain. It is this that tenderizes the heart. It's what cracks the crust of our hearts, opening them up, conditioning them to bring forth loving kindness and compassion. The foundation for the first precept, for all of them really, but for the first, is to understand that life is precious. All of life is precious, and that we do not wish to cause harm toward ourselves or any other living thing. Now, this wish to not cause harm is known in Pali as ahimsa. And the practice of ahimsa is essentially a practice of nonviolence in all forms, nonviolence physically, nonviolence mentally, nonviolence emotionally. But to understand how nonviolence can be made real in our lives, we have to first come to see the ways we subtly hurt ourselves. We cannot be truly kind to others if we're not yet kind to ourselves. Pema Chodron says, compassion for others begins with kindness to ourselves. So I ask, what are the subtle ways that you harm yourself? I ask because even as a therapist, it took me a long time to fully recognize the small ways I caused harm to myself. Now, I've spoken of this before, but for many years, standing in front of the mirror was a hell realm. You see, I have a skin condition which is often quite painful. My face hurts, and it hurt to look at it and to physically touch it. What was lost on me was a little voice in the back of my head that told me I must have done something to deserve this. It would recount all the things that I did wrong to support that argument. It told me I was ugly and reminded me that it was my fault. I felt shame and embarrassment. But this voice was so deeply ingrained that I didn't even notice it. It just felt normal for this kind of chatter to be going on in the background. Until one day, mindfulness kicked in. It kicked in enough and caught the voice red-handed. There it was, plain as day. I saw it. I heard me giving myself a hard time, unnecessarily making myself feel bad for what I had no control over. I was doing it. I was causing myself pain. No one else was there. And I had been doing it for years, quietly strengthening the inner critic. I was abusing myself. Now, this word may seem harsh, but the inner critic can be quite brutal. Once it was seen through, seen from the loving gaze of mindfulness, well, then I could feel my suffering. Oh my, it really hurts. And I could feel how it hurt. And then I heard the voice, the mindful voice asking, well, what do you need, darling? What does your face need to feel a little more comfortable? With mindfulness at the helm, these hands and these eyes could minister to the pain that was present. Mindfulness could assure me, little old Susan, that this voice wasn't helpful. And that actually was hurting me, or that I was hurting myself, feeding anger and ill will. So in the practice of mindfulness, we're training ourselves to be on the lookout for what's causing harm. This is exactly what we want to see, what we want to feel, the sting of our own harsh words and the lack of tenderness toward ourselves. Because if we don't see it, if we don't hear that voice, then that way of seeing and relating becomes the default. And then we start to not only treat ourselves, but we treat others and the world a little more callously. So let's just take a look at some of the few common ways we generally cause ourselves harm. How often do we hold on to anger, recounting the ways we've been aggrieved like beads on a mala? The Buddha said, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at somebody else, only we get burned. Isn't that true? Can we feel the pain of holding on to this kind of reaction and feeling how it intensifies and keeps going, right? How we keep putting another log on the fire? It's our job. This is what mindfulness is trying to do, is train us to see what we're doing. How about ruminating over disappointments and resentments? That was a favorite of mine. We can spend a lot of time reviewing past mistakes and disappointments, but the past is the past. It's water over the bridge. Nothing can be done but to learn from what happened. Can we shorten our self-flagellation? How about steeping in feelings of guilt or shame? These feelings are heavy. Guilt keeps us in the penalty box with no way out. And shame, it's a sinkhole, a vortex that doesn't end. Let's let ourselves learn from our mistakes, consider what went wrong, how we caused harm, and try to do something different the next time. Maybe we harm ourselves by spreading ourselves too thin, taking on too many responsibilities, or not getting enough sleep or downtime. Maybe we too speak unkindly to ourselves in the privacy of our minds, or treat our bodies unkindly, berating them, being critical of them, starving them one minute, then overindulging them the next. So what are we to do? How are we to work with the ways we cause ourselves harm? First, get better at seeing the critic in action. Call it out to yourself so you can really start to recognize when it's present. This is a skill, one of many we cultivate in mindfulness. When is the critic on the scene? Do we recognize its presence? What does it sound like? How do we feel inside when it's talking to us? 2, learn to hold the suffering kindly. Minister to the hurt. Minister to the self that is hurting, the double hurt, the initial hurt and the one we created by how we're talking to ourselves or treating ourselves. We know what a wise, kind person would say. We know what a dear friend or beneficial presence would say or do. So practice using these words, bringing that kind of care into the mix. And don't worry if it doesn't sound natural. It likely won't if we've spent a lifetime whispering unkind words into our ear. Practice talking nicely to yourself. Practice feeling into what the hurt needs to hurt less. Tune in, listen, feel, try something and see how it feels. Do you feel held? More comfortable? Does the pain feel cared for? Can you breathe a bit more easily? Does the intensity soften and the body relax a bit more? Train the heart to hold the suffering that is here. And finally, appreciate your efforts. Appreciate seeing the moments of unkindness and all of your efforts to try to hold it. This is the good job. This is such a good job, and this is what mindfulness wants to see so it can interrupt these harmful habits. Put your good efforts into your gratitude practice and recognize them. Each time we do this, we train the heart in the ways of ahimsa, of nonviolence. And we can do this. It's for our welfare and for the welfare of others. All right? Life is precious. We are precious. Every one of us is precious. Let's practice treating ourselves that way. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you. So let's take a few breaths and let's gently open up the body, create some more breathing room. Let's see. Maybe lengthen the upper body by stretching out the arms above the head or just reaching upward, and maybe leaning over to one side and then the other. Nice big inhalations, nice big exhalations. And maybe twist, take one hand and put it on the opposite knee. Twist around and take a breath in the twist. And then twist around to the other knee. Breath and twist. And if you're sitting down, perhaps rocking around a bit on the sits bones and tenderize the upper body so it softens and relax into an upright position. Nothing too tight, nothing too loose. Gently close the eyes and just kindly turn the gaze inward. And see how it feels at this hour of the day. And right here, I'm taking maybe a deeper than usual inhalation and allowing the exhalation to settle. Let the body settle down with it. And breathing in, opening up the whole interior. And breathing out, softening and settling all the way down through the body into the base onto the ground. Keep allowing the body to settle down, to soften and widen into the space around you. And we'll feel into the atmosphere, and let's try to soften it and warm it up. Feel with the heart, feel with the whole body how the moment is right now. And from this seated calm position, look up in the mind and see if it's busy with anything. And whatever thoughts are rolling around up there, imagine that they're like planets in the sky. And you let the cloud formations keep changing and moving through the field. Rest the gaze on the blue of the sky and sit and settle and breathe with the blue of the sky. Each time the mind wanders away in a cloud of thought, and you notice, take a breath, come back inside the body, soften, lift it up, and gently open the gaze to the blue of the sky. Softening and breathing. Making room for whatever is here. In the last few minutes of the meditation, feel into the space of the body and notice if it feels a bit more comfortable than it did at the beginning of the sitting. And if there's any way you relax a little bit more, give it permission to do so. And now drop in the awareness of just of all of us sitting with you and you sitting here with us. Each of us making room for ourselves and each other to be just as we are. This is a great blessing in the world right now. And in the last few minutes of the meditation, I just invite you to gently open your eyes, soften the gaze, look at the screen, who's ever on the screen, and just appreciate. And in lieu of a bell, which will sound not unpleasant, if you'll kindly put your hands together and, or in some way just acknowledge each other. Thank you all so much for your practice today. Thank you for bearing with me and all the technological difficulties. And if you'll all unmute yourselves, Lori or Jay, if you'll give them permission and stop the recording, unmute yourselves, and we can have our goodbyes to one another.
Can you unmute?
Can you unmute? Can you stop the recording, if you will?
Yeah.
Thank you.